Welcome back, deep divers. Ready for another plunge into uncharted literary waters?
Always.
Great. So today, we're diving headfirst into Navessa Allen's Lights Out. It's been generating some serious buzz, and for good reason, I think.
Yeah, it's a real page turner.
Definitely. And what's really got us hooked is how it tackles this dark romance thing.
Mm-hmm.
We've got this excerpt from a literary analysis, and we're going to use that to kind of dissect like how the story uses this dark romance to explore some pretty intense stuff, love, desire, all that good stuff.
Exactly. And I think what makes Lights Out so interesting is how it kind of flips the script on those traditional romance tropes right from the
Yeah.
get-go.
Yeah, totally. Like right away, we meet Josh, and well, he's a bit much.
To say the least, yeah. He's definitely got this intense, almost obsessive vibe.
Yeah, the analysis straight up calls him a stalker. Not your typical Prince Charming.
Definitely not. And it really makes you question, like, can a relationship that starts with that kind of fear, that lack of safety, ever actually turn into something real?
That's a great question. Like, can love really blossom from that kind of, I don't know, unsettling beginning?
That's what Alan seems to be exploring, isn't she? Like, the book doesn't shy away from how creepy Josh's actions are, but it also shows this shift in his character. There's this scene, and it's super intense, where he actually ends up protecting Allie from a real threat.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And suddenly he goes from, like, this lurking shadow to someone who's actually keeping her safe.
Exactly. And it really makes you think, right? Like, where's the line between, obsession and actual care?
Yeah, and it's all happening against the backdrop of Allie's life. She's a trauma nurse, so she's kind of used to intensity, to high-stakes
Yeah.
situations, you know what I mean?
I was just thinking that the analysis even suggests that, like, maybe that's why she's drawn to Josh in the first place. Maybe she's not the type who wants, like, a normal, predictable romance.
Right. She needs that edge, that excitement.
And maybe, yeah, maybe that's what she sees in Josh, that willingness to push the limits, to break the rules.
I think a lot of people can relate to that. That feeling of wanting something more, something outside the box, whether it's a relationship or like anything, really.
Absolutely. And Alan captures that so well. Lights Out really delves into this whole idea of, like, what happens when our desires pull us towards something that's not, socially acceptable, something maybe even a little
It
dangerous.
makes you question everything. Like what happens when those desires lead you down a path you never expected?
Exactly. And that's where I think the real brilliance of Lights Out lies.
And then there's Josh again. Right. Like Ellen doesn't just let him off the hook for being, a stalker,
Hmm.
but she also makes him human.
Yeah, she gives us these glimpses into his past, into his struggles. You start to see that he's not just this one-dimensional villain.
Right. He's complicated. He's got these layers to him.
And that's where it gets really interesting because it makes you wonder if someone can do something really bad, like really messed up, but still have some good in them?
Like maybe good and bad aren't always so black and white.
Exactly. And that whole moral gray area thing, it's like woven into the fabric of the whole story.
It's everywhere.
It's in every character, every situation. Alan is constantly challenging us to think about what we believe is right and wrong.
Like she makes you look beyond just the surface
Yeah.
and consider why people do the things they do, even the bad stuff.
And that's what makes it so real, so relatable. It's like we all make mistakes. We all have those moments where we're not proud of ourselves, but it doesn't necessarily define who we are as people, right?
Exactly. And that's like, I think the heart of Lights Out. It's messy, it's complicated, and it doesn't give you those easy answers, which is what makes it so good.
Yeah, and in a way, I think that's Alan's gift to us as readers. She's giving us the space to grapple with these tough questions, these moral dilemmas, without judgment.
It's like she's saying, hey, let's have an honest conversation about the messiness of being human.
Exactly. And that, to me, is what makes Lights Out so much more than just a romance novel. It's a reflection of life itself, with all its beauty and all its ugliness.
Okay, so we've talked about how Lights Out flips the script on those traditional romance tropes. And we've touched on this idea of moral complexity. But what really intrigues me is how Alan tackles the whole concept of desire.
Right. Because it's everywhere in this book.
It's like this driving force that's pushing everything forward.
Yeah, it's like this primal energy that can be so powerful, so intoxicating, but also, really dangerous.
Yeah, and we see that play out so clearly in Allie's attraction to Josh. She's drawn to him, even though she knows, like, logically that it's probably a bad idea.
There's just something about him that she can't resist. And I think that's something we can all relate to on some level, right? Like we've all felt that pull towards something or someone, even when we know it might not be good for us.
Like, desire has this way of clouding our judgment, making us act in ways we normally wouldn't.
Exactly. And Lights Out explores that so well. It asks, like, can desire ever truly be irrational?
Or is it always going to lead us down this unpredictable path?
I mean, it's a great question, one that I don't think has an easy answer.
It really makes you think about how we navigate our own desires. Like, how do we find that balance between, giving into those cravings and making choices that are healthy and fulfilling?
Yeah, and I think Lights Out is more about exploring those questions than providing answers, you know?
It's about acknowledging the power of desire, both the good and the bad, and how it shapes our lives.
Right. It's not about judging or condemning, but about understanding.
And I think that's what sets Lights Out apart from those typical romance novels.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a love story. It's a story about human nature, about the choices we make when faced with these intense and often conflicting desires.
Absolutely. And it does it all with this raw honesty that just draws you in.
And I think that's why it resonates with so many people.
Because it's real, it's messy, and it forces us to confront those darker parts of ourselves that we often try to ignore.
Yeah, and maybe, just maybe, by facing those shadows, we can learn something valuable about ourselves and about the world around us.
I think you're onto something there. It's like Lights Out is inviting us to have this uncomfortable but ultimately necessary conversation about the complexities of desire and how it shapes our lives.
And I think that's a conversation worth having.
Absolutely. And one thing that really struck me about Lights Out, it's like, yeah, okay, so Aly and Josh's relationship, it's definitely not your typical love story.
Right. That,
But it's not all darkness and creepiness either. Like there are these genuine moments of tenderness and connection between them.
yeah, that's so true. It would be easy to just write it off as like, oh, this is just a messed up
All
relationship.
right.
But it's deeper than that. Alan actually shows us these glimpses of like real care and understanding between them. And it makes their whole dynamic so much more complicated and honestly more realistic.
Exactly. It's like she's reminding us that even in relationships that might seem, off or even taboo to outsiders, there can still be that deep emotional connection.
I think that's such an important message, especially today.
Mm.
You know, like we're constantly bombarded with these picture perfect images of what love should be.
Oh, totally. Like those Instagram couples, everything's filtered and perfect.
Exactly. And Lights Out is kind of like a breath of fresh air because it's saying, hey,
Oh.
you know what? There's no one right way to do relationship.
Like it's not a cookie cutter thing.
Exactly. What matters is finding that connection that feels real and fulfilling for you, whether or not it fits into society's little box.
I love that. And through this exploration of unconventional romance, Alan's also tackling this bigger theme of societal expectations.
Oh, yeah, totally. It's like she's using Allie and Josh to hold up a mirror to those expectations about love and desire.
Like who gets to decide what's normal anyway?
Right. And by challenging those norms, Lights Out is like this invitation to question everything.
It makes you think about all those messages we've internalized about relationships, even if those messages don't really resonate with us.
And that's so powerful because so many people feel like they don't fit into those neat little boxes that society tries to put us in.
Exactly. And Lights Out celebrates that individuality. It's like a permission slip to be yourself and to find love and connection on your own terms.
And you mentioned earlier that Allie really thrives on pushing boundaries.
Mhm.
Do you think her relationship with Josh, as unconventional as it is actually part of her self-discovery?
Oh, I definitely think so.
Yeah.
Like by stepping outside her comfort zone and embracing this relationship that, kind of defies expectations, she's forced to confront those deeper parts of herself.
So it's not about saying that their relationship is like the ideal or anything.
Right.
It's more about how it becomes this catalyst for her growth.
Exactly. It's like she's using this experience, this crazy, messy experience, to break free from those societal constraints.
There's this quote by Anais Nin that keeps popping into my head. It's something like, and the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom.
Wow, I love that.
And I just keep thinking about Allie. It's like she's choosing to blossom, even if it means taking a risk.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
So yeah, Lights Out might be marketed as this dark romance, but it's so much more than that. It's about self-discovery, challenging those norms, and finding the courage to embrace what makes you unique.
It's about being true to yourself, even when it's hard.
Yeah. And the analysis you sent over it really highlights how skillfully Allen weaves all these complex themes into a story that's both gripping and thought-provoking.
She doesn't shy away from the tough stuff, but she does it in a way that's just so compelling and relatable.
It makes you think about how we often talk about finding the light in our relationships.
Yeah.
But what if there's something to be said for exploring those darker corners too?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Like, what if those darker, messier experiences are actually just as important, just as valuable as those picture-perfect moments?
That's a really interesting idea.
Maybe by acknowledging and exploring those shadows, we gain a more complete understanding of ourselves and our relationships.
I think there's definitely something to that. Like, it's not about glorifying the darkness.
Right.
It's about recognizing that the human experience encompasses all of it, the light and the dark.
And maybe by embracing that whole spectrum, we can find a deeper appreciation for both the light and the darkness.
Yeah, it's about finding that balance.
This deep dive has really got me thinking. It's like Lights Out is giving us permission to question everything we thought we knew about love and relationships,
To step outside those comfort zones and see what happens.
and to find beauty and connection in the most unexpected places.
Yeah, and it's like we're so conditioned to believe that we need to find the one, you know?
Right, like there's this soulmate out there who's going to complete us.
Exactly. But Lights Out is like, hold on a second. Maybe that's not that simple.
Yeah, maybe it's more about finding a connection that feels real and authentic, even if it doesn't fit into society's little mold.
And maybe those unconventional relationships, the ones that kind of shake things up, are the ones that teach us the most about ourselves. I think that's a really powerful idea. You know, like sometimes it's those experiences that challenge us that really force us to grow.
Wow, this deep dive has been such a mind trip.
I know, right?
It feels like we've barely scratched the surface of everything Lights Out.
Yeah.
Trying to say.
It's definitely a book that makes you think
Mm,
and keeps you thinking long after you finished it.
I know, I'm going to be mulling this over for days.
Me too. And I have to say, I'm so glad we had this conversation.
Me too. Your insights have been amazing.
Well, thank you. You've definitely given me a lot to think about as well.
And hopefully our listeners out there will be inspired to pick up Lights Out and see what they think.
Yeah, I think anyone who's ever questioned those traditional ideas about love and relationships will find something really compelling in this book.
For sure. Well, deep divers, that's a wrap on this exploration of Lights Out.
It's been a real pleasure diving in with you.
Likewise. And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into something equally fascinating. Until then, keep exploring and keep those minds open.